Hey there and welcome to BingeBot, where we recap all the latest and greatest TV shows to help keep you in the loop. Today we're diving into Slough Horses Season 4, a tale of espionage and subterfuge set in England and based on the novels by Mick Herron. As always, if you guys want to support our channel, you can do so via YouTube memberships, Patreon, or Buy Me a Coffee, and gain early access to videos, our completed scripts, and so much more. Well, let's catch back up with Jackson Lamb and the rest of the crew, starting with Episode 1, Identity Theft. Now in the final chapter of his life, David Cartwright, once a legendary operative of the British Secret Service, the MI5, is tragically battling dementia, which leaves him plagued by paranoia to the point where he sleeps with a gun at his side. On this particular evening, David's awakened by a knock at his door, and when he opens it, he's pleased to see his grandson, River, who rushes in from the rain and heads upstairs to prepare a bath for David. However, as River runs up the stairs, David begins to feel like there's something not quite right about his visitor, and ultimately becomes convinced that it isn't actually River, leading him to pick up his shotgun and cautiously head upstairs. Once David enters the bathroom, the man turns around and, upon seeing the shotgun, pleads with David to lower it, insisting that he's River. But David, still unconvinced, pulls the trigger, killing the man and sending his body collapsing into the bathtub. Yet, as David approaches the body, he tragically realizes that it was actually River, leaving him shattered that he has mistakenly killed his beloved grandson. After being struck on the head with a concrete slab, Nick Duffy, the leader of MI5's tactical unit known as the Dogs, is revealed to have survived, though he now lies in a coma, resulting in Emma Flight taking over as the new head of the Dogs. Upon learning that David's pressed his panic button, Flight arrives at his house only to find that David's gone, leaving behind a lifeless body in the bathtub. To verify the identity of the body, Flight calls Jackson Lamb, the drunken leader of Slough House, MI5's most underfunded branch. When Lamb arrives, Flight explains that David pressed the panic button over 40 minutes ago, but the police responded slowly, as David has a history of triggering false alarms, and they assumed that this wouldn't be any different. Entering the bathroom, Lamb notices that the man's been shot twice, once in the chest and again in the face, leaving him completely unrecognizable. To help Lamb identify the body, Flight informs him that they've checked the man's pockets and have found River's phone and wallet, which is why she called Lamb specifically, given that River's one of Slough House's agents, known as the Slough Horses. Comprehending this information quickly, Lamb looks at the mangled face one final time before informing Flight that he's certain that the body is indeed River's.
Yeah, it's him.
You're sure?
It's River Cartwright.
Early the next morning, Catherine Standish is in her apartment when she hears an unexpected knock at the door, finding it to be Lamb. Even though Catherine's quit working as Lamb's assistant after years of enduring his harsh treatment, he still refuses to approve her resignation, meaning that she still legally works for him, forcing her to reluctantly allow him in. Almost instantly, Lamb breaks the news of River's death, but when Catherine appears visibly shaken, Lamb quickly cuts her off, telling her to drop the act, as they both know that River isn't really dead. And given that River's car is parked right outside, Lamb concludes that he must be hiding here. Unable to deny it, Catherine confirms that River's indeed alive, but explains that he only stopped by briefly to drop off his grandfather. She also mentions that before River left, she gave him a phone for emergencies, but he turned it off to avoid being tracked. Now that he knows the truth, Lamb heads to the bedroom, where he finds David asleep. While all of this is unfolding, River's already left the country and traveled to France, revealing that the man that David shot was, in fact, an assassin pretending to be River. Riding in the back of a taxi and heading towards a remote town, River's holding the assassin's passport in his hands, determined to track down his identity and find out why he was sent to kill his grandfather. Episode 2, A Stranger Comes to Town. The reason that River hid his grandfather at Catherine's place and then traveled to France becomes clear in the moments that followed David killing the assassin. Right after David fired the shotgun, the real River arrives to check on his grandfather as he usually does. Calling for David, River receives no response, leading him to head upstairs to the bathroom, where he's shocked by the bloody scene. Instead of panicking though, River decides to start by reassuring David that the man he killed wasn't him, but an imposter. And wanting to uncover who the assassin is, River starts examining him, beginning by noticing that they do actually look alike quite a bit. Additionally, he finds the assassin's passport, which shows that his name is Adam Lockhead, as well as a receipt from a cafe in the French town of Lavanda. Upon hearing the name Lavanda, David's visibly rattled, leading him to suddenly press his panic button, wanting MI5 to come and handle the situation. River, on the other hand, is unnerved that David pressed the button, as he knows that when MI5 arrives, they'll begin questioning David, who's in no state for interrogation and will likely say something incriminating. Acknowledging that this is a likely possibility, David agrees to do whatever River thinks is best, which prompts River to ask him to wait downstairs, as they'll need to leave for a safe place before the police arrive. Once alone in the bathroom, River slips his own phone and wallet into Adam's pockets before picking up the shotgun and firing it again, completely obliterating Adam's face. A gruesome yet clever plan that successfully convinces MI5 that, in a tragic mix-up due to his dementia, David accidentally killed River, and upon realizing what he did, pressed the panic button before fleeing to avoid arrest. In the present, River traces the receipt that he found in Adam's pocket to the cafe in Lavanda, where the manager reveals that Adam used to live in a nearby mansion called Les Arbres. Arriving at Les Arbres, River breaks in and finds it seemingly empty, and as he explores the rooms, he notices a mural depicting various trees, animal, and fish, which catches his attention for some reason, prompting him to take a picture of it with his phone. Continuing his search, River finds a photograph of 4 men on a hunting trip, where the older man is standing and the 3 younger ones are kneeling beside him. Right away, River recognizes that the second man from the right is Adam Lockhead. What's surprising, though, is that River also recognizes another man from the photo, the one sitting right next to Adam, as Robert Winters, who is responsible for the recent suicide bombing in the West Acres shopping center in London, which claimed 23 lives. Before he can continue his search, River smells smoke and realizes that someone set the mansion on fire, prompting him to rush to the exit. However, as he approaches the door, he's suddenly struck on the head by the older man from the photograph, Frank Harkness, who pins River down and tries to cut his throat. Fortunately, before that happens, Victor, a man who's secretly been following River, arrives with a shotgun, forcing Frank to back off and run away. Having saved River's life, Victor escorts him to his car, but just as River begins to thank him, Victor knocks him unconscious with the butt of his shotgun as Les Arbres goes up in flames. Episode 3. Penny for your thoughts. Waking up, River finds himself in Victor's house, where he's forced to wait until Victor's cousin, Natasha, arrives. Upon seeing River, Natasha's almost in disbelief, explaining that he looks just like her son, whose real name is Bertrand, not Adam Lockhead, a small detail that suggests his passport wasn't completely authentic. When River reveals that Bertrand's dead, Natasha isn't particularly upset, acknowledging that Bertrand was a depraved person who had made a habit of assaulting Lavanda's residents.
So maybe he'll put it down when I tell you that he can't hurt anyone anymore because he's dead. He turned up at my grandfather's pretending to be me because he was going to drown him in a bath. But then my grandfather shot him.
After explaining that he's MI5, River shows Natasha the photo that he found in Les Arbres, asking her to tell him everything she knows about the men in it. Willing to help, Natasha explains that the 3 younger men with Frank are all of his sons, elaborating that Frank's a master manipulator who used to lure young women into falling in love with him and bearing his children. Then, once they gave birth and nurtured the babies, Frank would kick the mothers out of Les Arbres as he wanted to raise their sons himself by relentlessly mentally and physically abusing them until they grew up to become ruthless, heartless mercenaries, which would explain why one of them eventually snapped and committed the West Acres suicide bombing. As Natasha continues to answer River's questions, they're suddenly interrupted by the angry voices of the town's men gathering outside, who ultimately come crashing through the front door, intent on capturing River, still believing that he's Bertrand and wanting to make him pay for all the suffering that he's brought upon their town. Seeing that there's no convincing them that he's not Bertrand, River's forced to bolt upstairs, jump from a window, and then sprint through the narrow streets until he finds a man riding a bike, which he commandeers and rides away, escaping safely from Lavanda. Episode 4. Returns. After briefly serving as the director of MI5, Diana Taverner has returned to her previous role as deputy director, while Claude Whelan has taken over as a new director of MI5. Thanks to the blood work results, Diana now knows the corpse found in David's bathroom wasn't River, leaving her wondering who the dead man was and where the real River might be. At MI5's headquarters, known as the Park, Diana meets with Whelan and Geedy, a diligent agent who's reviewed all records related to the MI5's Cold Body program, a secret initiative that provides undercover agents with official identification documents like passports and any other necessary paperwork. Ideally, Geedy wouldn't have found anything out of order, but unfortunately, she's uncovered 2 major issues. First, she discovered that the passport of Robert Winters, the West Acres bomber, was issued by MI5 through the Cold Body program, a fact that leaves both Diana and Whelan baffled. Geedy's second revelation is equally puzzling, but it proves useful, as she's found that another Cold Body passport was issued with the name of Adam Lockhead, a man who all 3 of them acknowledge bears a strong resemblance to River, which prompts them to deduce that Adam was the body that was found in David's bathroom, and that River used Adam's passport to leave the country. With this lead, Geedy tracks Adam's passport, discovering that it's currently on a train headed back to London. Upon arrival, River heads directly to his grandfather's house, even though it's under surveillance, and sneaks through the back door, making his way upstairs to his childhood room. Opening the dresser, River pulls out a box filled with cherished items from his childhood where he finds a few cards with drawings on them, making it clear why the mural in Les Arbres caught his attention, as some parts of it are identical to the drawings on the cards that he's had since childhood. As he pauses to reflect on the implications of this discovery, River hears the dogs arrive to search the house, having received orders from Diana to capture him. But luckily, they fail to find him, and eventually they give up and leave. Hearing their cars pull away, River opens the attic hatch in the ceiling and climbs out, relieved that he wasn't caught. However, Flight's one step ahead, as she suddenly appears, having stayed behind and simply waited for River to reveal himself. Episode 5. Grave Danger. At her home, Molly Doran, the reclusive record keeper of MI5, hears an unexpected knock on the door, and when she opens it, she finds Frank, who forces his way in by threatening her with a gun. While holding Molly captive, Frank watches a live feed on his phone through a hidden camera outside of David's house, placed there by Patrice, Frank's last surviving son, and the final man in the photo that River found. Seeing that River's been apprehended by Flight and is being transported in the dog's convoy, Frank orders Patrice to do whatever it takes to intercept the convoy before it reaches the park. Meanwhile, Lamb and Catherine have been pressing David to reveal why he was targeted for assassination. But David's been refusing to tell them the truth, which compels Lamb to exploit David's dementia and convince him that the man he killed in the bathroom was actually River. Overwhelmed with guilt, David finally breaks and reveals the truth.
I shot somebody else, somebody pretending to be River.
No, I thought it was River. That's what you said.
Jackson, no.
No, I...
Back in the early 90s, David used his influence as a high-ranking official in MI5 to send one of his agents, Sam Chapman, to Lace Arbor, where Sam met with the younger Frank Harkness, a former CIA operative who'd become a mercenary. At Lace Arbor, Frank's men took apart the car that Sam arrived in, uncovering a large stash of weapons, explosives, and cold-body passports that Frank would go on to use for his mercenary operations over the coming decades. In return, Frank handed over David's daughter, Isabel, whom he'd manipulated and impregnated like he did with many other young women. With this revelation, Lamb now understands that the reason David was targeted for assassination is that Frank knew David would connect him to the West Acres bombing, as David was the one who provided Frank with the Robert Winters passport. As night sets in, Frank informs Molly that it's time for him to leave, but he first needs to send a message to her superiors at MI5, something he says while turning her wheelchair to face the wall. Believing that her time has come, Molly tells Frank to just get it over with, but surprisingly, instead of a gunshot, she hears the door slam shut. Turning around, Molly finds that Frank has left, but only after he'd placed 5 envelopes on her desk, each one labeled the name of a top MI5 official, including Claude Whelan. With River securely handcuffed to the ceiling handle in the Jeep, Flight feels in control as they near the park. Her confidence is abruptly shattered, however, when a garbage truck comes crashing into the lead Jeep of the convoy. Before River and Flight can grasp what's happening, they watch in shock as a hail of bullets strikes the Jeep, killing the 2 dogs in the front seats before the assailant steps into view, revealing himself to be Patrice. As Patrice approaches and shatters River's window, Flight exits the car and engages him in brutal hand-to-hand combat, during which they trade heavy blows until Patrice slams Flight's head against the car, knocking her unconscious. With his gun raised, Patrice orders River to stay still, but instead of shooting him, he breaks the handcuffs, drags River through the streets, throws him into the trunk of his car, and speeds off. Episode 6. Hello, Goodbye. Arriving at his destination, Patrice stops the car, pulls River out of the trunk, and takes him to a crowded restaurant where Frank is waiting for him. Taking a seat across from Frank, River begins the conversation by saying, "Hello, Dad," and unfazed, Frank replies with an equally calm, "Hello, son." When Frank asks River how he figured out that he was his father, River explains the mural he found in Lace Arbor was identical to the drawings on the birthday cards that his mother, Isabel, used to send him when he was a child living with his grandfather, which led him to deduce that his mother was one of the women living in Lace Arbor whom Frank had manipulated and exploited.
Used her to breed your own private army.
I was using her to secure funds and means.
What does that mean?
Maybe you should ask your grandfather.
Seemingly impressed by his son's perceptiveness, Frank remarks that River's potential is wasted at MI5, and he offers him a chance to work with him as a mercenary instead. As expected, River's entirely uninterested in the offer, especially considering that Frank literally tried to cut his throat in Lace Arbor. Knowing Frank will likely try to kill him for rejecting the offer, River secretly pulls Catherine's phone from his pocket. Having turned it on while in the trunk of the car, he discreetly calls his fellow slow horse, Louisa, under the table, which enables Slough House's hacker, Roddy Ho, to track the phone. Understanding that Sam Chapman can also connect Frank to the West Acres bombing, since he was the one who delivered the cold body passports to Lace Arbor, Lamb repeatedly calls Sam, aware that he too is in danger. When the calls go unanswered, Lamb rushes directly to Sam's office, but tragically, he's too late, as Patrice has already gotten to him, viciously beaten him, and left him for dead on the floor. To make matters worse, Patrice took Sam's phone and listened to all of his voicemails, including a message from Moira, Slough House's temporary replacement for Catherine, saying that David's currently hiding in Slough House. With River's location now known, MI5 sends a large team of dogs to the restaurant spearheaded by Flight and Louisa. And noticing the dogs approach, Frank forces River up and steps outside with a gun pressed against his back, facing off against the armed forces aiming directly at him. Seeing that he's outmatched, Frank surprises everyone by suddenly shouting, "Grenade!" which he produces from his pocket, then pulls the pin and slips it into River's hood, creating a wave of chaos among the crowd that he uses as a cover to make his escape. While everyone runs away from the panicking River, only Louisa runs towards him and bravely removes the grenade from his hood at the very last moment, tossing it into a nearby lake, where it explodes with a massive splash but harms no one. Refusing to let Frank get away, River leads the dogs into a chase through a bustling train station, yet, despite their numbers, none of them are able to locate Frank, sparking a realization in River, who suddenly stops in his tracks. Reflecting on their earlier conversation at the restaurant, River remembers that Frank revealed that the reason he's never been caught is that he recognizes the best way to escape a chase is to stand still. With those words in mind, River begins looking around at all the people in the station going about their lives. And after just a few moments, he calmly walks over and sits down next to Frank, who's forced to surrender, allowing Flight to take him into custody.
Good job, son. I'll take the later train.
Shut up.
At the same time Frank was being chased, Patrice arrived at Slough House, breaking in and opening fire on anyone in sight. Faced with this unexpected danger, Roddy Ho quickly hides David in the upstairs bathroom of Lamb's office. With Lamb still out, the remaining slow horses, Marcus, Shirley, and the newest recruit, Koo, attempt to fend off Patrice on their own, returning fire, throwing knives, and in Koo's case, hurling a steaming kettle of boiling water. Though Koo's unpredictability would have been helpful, he's forced to retreat outside after Patrice shoots him in the arm. Realizing that they need to protect David, Marcus insists that Shirley must stay in Lamb's office to guard the bathroom door while he steps outside to confront Patrice. Given her close relationship with Marcus, Shirley's concerned as she watches him head outside, only to grow even more worried when she hears a gunshot followed by complete silence, leaving her wondering whether Marcus has killed Patrice or if it's the other way around. To her horror, Patrice suddenly crashes through the office window and aims his gun at her, ready to shoot. But in this moment of hopelessness, Lamb finally arrives, hurling a bottle at Patrice's head, which gives Shirley an opening to relentlessly strike Patrice with the butt of her gun, eventually knocking him out. After cuffing Patrice to the wall, Lamb receives a call from Molly, who insists that he must come to her apartment immediately. Once Shirley heads outside to check on Marcus, she tragically finds his lifeless body. Heartbroken, she returns to the office, where she angrily presses the gun to Patrice's head. Surprisingly, Koo, who's usually quiet and emotionally detached, urges Shirley not to kill Patrice, reminding her that Marcus wouldn't have wanted her to carry the guilt of killing a helpless, chained man, as he loved her and always hoped she'd learn to love herself. Moved by Koo's words, Shirley lowers the gun, passing it to him before exiting the room. Ironically, Koo ends up ignoring his own advice, and suddenly fires 3 fatal shots at Patrice before walking out of the room with an indifferent demeanor. After retrieving the 5 envelopes that Frank left at Molly's place and returning to Slough House, Lamb requests an urgent meeting with Diana, during which he discloses the envelopes and informs her that they must release Frank within 12 hours. Otherwise, all of the information inside will be leaked online, which would be catastrophic for MI5, as the letters contain records proving that, after David Cartwright's retirement, MI5 hired Frank and his mercenaries multiple times over the years to handle jobs that were too unethical or legally questionable for the agency to conduct themselves. Knowing that they simply can't afford a scandal of this magnitude, Diana decides to take the envelopes to Whelan, confident that he will agree that they need to release Frank immediately. In the days that follow, as everyone tries to recover from the recent events, River realizes that it's no longer safe for David to live alone and decides to move him into a nursing home. Understandably, this is devastating for David, who begins to plead with River not to leave him there, and wanting to comfort his grandfather, River promises to visit daily. But this doesn't calm David's fears as he continues to beg River to take him back home. Unable to bear seeing his grandfather in this state, River promises he'll visit the first thing next morning and simply walks away. As he tries to fight back tears over what he just did, River receives a call from Lamb, who tells him to meet him at a bar. In a rare moment of compassion, Lamb allows River to sit with him at the bar, but only if he buys his own drink and doesn't say a word. Although this is a small gesture, it puts a faint smile on River's face as he realizes that this is Lamb's unique way of reminding him that, no matter what happens to his grandfather, he won't be alone. And that wraps up Slow Horses Season 4. Hey, thanks for checking out a recap and for watching until the end. If you guys like this video, consider sharing it with a friend or maybe just dropping us a like. And if you want to see more, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell. We'll be back soon with another recap, but for now, BingeBot is logging off.